All right, broadcasting. All right. Hi, everyone. So, this is my newest live stream here on Mindgasms, and I'm really excited I get to talk today to, I might get your last name wrong there, but William Ferraiolo. Might be pronouncing that incorrectly,
No, it's pretty
but
close.
pretty
Ferraiolo.
close.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty good. Yeah.
Sorry, say that again?
Ferraiolo. I was saying you're pretty close. It's pretty good.
Ferraiolo?
Yeah,
Okay, so like the second A is kind of a silent one?
sort of. Yeah, the AI together kind of sound like a Y. Is
Oh,
there a
okay. Okay.
delay? I can't tell. Are we speaking simultaneously, or is there a little delay when I speak?
No, I don't see a delay there. There might be a
Oh,
delay on your end there. One thing that might fix that is when when I'm talking, I'll mute my mic and then uh or sorry, when you're talking, I'll mute my mic and then when I'm talking, maybe try muting your mic. Sometimes that fixes that.
well, I'm not sure there is one. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, so anyway, so William is a professor of philosophy at San Joaquin Delta College in California. And I believe we started talking to each other on LinkedIn, and I remember you sent me an article about how Stoicism is similar to Buddhism that I thought was really interesting. We talked about that, and I think that's how we started communicating with each other at first.
Yeah.
So anyway, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself there.
There's not a whole lot to tell. You've like you said, I have been teaching at Delta College for 21 years now. I teach, mostly introductory level philosophy, but I've been really interested in Stoicism since my early 30s, and I'm almost 50 now. So been at this for almost 20 years, reading everything I can get my hands on, contemporary stuff, the ancient stuff, and got a book out. I won't hard sell it too much, but obviously I'm kind of hoping people might pick this up and I've been doing a lot of these interviews lately, and I'm not good at it. So you're gonna have to guide this for the most part. I have all sorts of boring stories about me, but there's more interesting things to talk about than me. So fire away with whatever you got.
All right, awesome. Yeah, we can we'll mention that your book at the end again there, and then if I'll add links for it in the description of this live stream after when I air it on my channel. And yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Stoicism too. I first heard about it like a lot of people from Tim Ferriss, and then
Mhm.
I read some of like the classic texts like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and stuff like Seneca. I'm reading the Tao of Seneca right now, the one that Tim Ferriss published for free on his blog,
Hmm.
and I would say uh, I like I like a lot of the parables in from writers like Seneca, but I actually kind of like Epictetus's On the Art of Living. That's probably my favorite Stoic book that I've read so far, even though it doesn't have like the parables. I just like just the straightforward instruction nature of it a lot about that. So what do you think about that in terms of like the parables versus the more just like pragmatic kind of approach to it from people like Epictetus rather.
Well, Epictetus is by far and away my favorite of the ancient Stoics. If
Oh,
we
cool.
lost everything Seneca wrote and everything that Marcus Aurelius wrote, we'd be losing something valuable, but not nearly so much as if we were to lose the discourses of Epictetus. So I recommend after you read the handbook, go back and read the full discourses. You can pick up a copy pretty much anywhere, or, through Amazon.
Oh,
And
cool.
I call reading Epictetus just drinking straight from the well. It doesn't get more full-bodied Stoic than that. Then I would recommend actually reading a bit about Diogenes and about the Cynics, and you'll understand a bit more about what the Stoics were really after. I think a lot of contemporary interpreters tend to forget that Stoicism descended from Cynicism, and Epictetus idolized Diogenes as well as Socrates and other figures. So I think some people have a something of a slightly colored view of Stoicism. They kind of miss out on its roots, and that causes what I would suggest are maybe some awkward interpretations of certain texts and certain claims. But we can get into that later if you want to, or not.
Okay.
But yeah, read Epictetus. If you remember nothing else I say, read everything you can get directly from. Well, Epictetus himself didn't write it; his student Arian wrote it, but it's as close as we get.
Yeah, I just wrote down Diogenes and the Cynics and Epictetus discourses to add
Yeah,
those to my to read list.
yeah,
Awesome. I didn't realize that the Stoicism came out of the Cynicism. That's interesting.
yeah.
Of course.
Zeno, the founder
Sorry.
of Stoicism, was Zeno of Citium or Citium, however you pronounce it. And
Okay.
yeah, he sort of got interested in practical philosophy by listening to the Cynics and interacting with the Cynics, and then he founded Stoicism, which was maybe a little bit less abrasive and a little more tolerable to the masses than Cynics, who would do lots of outrageous things just to deface the coinage of the social constructs, deface the currency, is the way Diogenes put it. They like to make sport of and ridicule people for uh, all the silly rites and rituals we go through that have nothing to do with nature or survival, or sort of living what they conceived of as a real full-blooded human life. Um, so Diogenes would do things like he would masturbate in public. I don't know if this is true. He would allegedly defecate in public. He slept in a tub or a cask, and he would constantly ridicule people and um, just challenge them to think about what they were doing, why they were doing it, and whether it actually made any sense or had anything to do with living a decent human life. But that's I guess people want to hear about Stoicism rather than cynicism. I love both of them myself.
Oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't realize the stories about the Cynics. That's hilarious.
Oh, you got to read
Yeah.
about Diogenes. He was a character, one of my heroes.
Okay. Um, oh, I also, by the way, I like your awesome epic beard. It's very like philosopherish.
Yeah, well, it's my act. I gotta I gotta look the part. You
Yeah.
know, I haven't
Yeah.
I'm wearing a hat because I haven't shaved my head. I usually shave my head about every 3 weeks, and when I don't, it
Oh,
looks like
okay.
that. So haven't
Oh.
had to shave it this morning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I noticed on your profile, you're normally like kind of like bald, pretty much, right?
yeah. People think I'm bald. I actually have a full head of hair.
Oh,
I just
okay.
I don't like it. I don't like to have it. My mom, it drives my mom crazy. She yells at me about it. She says, "Billy, you're almost 50 years old. You got a full head of hair. People would kill for that." But
Yeah.
that's what moms do. What are you
I
gonna do?
actually uh I actually normally shave my head too, but then like a year or so ago I just kind of randomly decided to start growing out my hair, and then I kind of got told by a few girls that I look good with longer hair, so I decided, I might as well just I think I'll just keep this like this for a while.
If it's working for you,
Yeah.
looks like you've got about a year's worth of growth there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm having a hard time imagining you with a shaved head, but I'll work on it.
Yeah, that actually a few years or so ago I was a power lifter and I was a lot bigger, like I weighed around 230 at my biggest, and I'm back down to like around 170 now, and I was much bigger, and I tended to like have a really short shaved head and like mutton chops too. And I also had glasses, so I looked completely different from the way I look now.
You must have been a scary looking dude. Uh,
Yeah.
what
Yes.
made you quit? Was it an injury or something?
I kind of just like got bored of doing the same lifts like squat, bench, and deadlift and other stuff.
Yeah,
And so I kind of gradually transitioned out of competing in that. And then I kind of transferred to, I guess, more functional training, as some people call it. And I
yeah,
do like calisthenics or body weight workouts, like kind of like the ones that you do that we've talked about before. And then I also do I also like using kettlebells. I love doing kettlebell workouts. And then I still do strength training, a heavy strength training workout about once a week too. And then sometimes I go for jogs in the forest too, because I'm still getting over my bias against cardio from when I was a power lifter, even though I stopped competing at least a few years ago.
Well, you gotta keep work on the cardio. It's the first thing to go. I used to do a lot of lifting. I used to spend a lot of time in the gym, but I haven't actually been to a gym in probably 8 years now. It's all calisthenics, all body weight exercises. Every once in a while, I'll pull out a dumbbell for biceps because it's harder to get to get a good bicep burn without the dumbbells. You can do it with a straight bar, just uh, pull ups, chin ups, and so on. But it's easier to just grab the dumbbell. Apart from that, it's all push ups, isometrics, all sorts of other things we can talk about later if you want. But it's just simpler. It's simpler. It doesn't cost as much money. You don't have to join a gym, and it is. I find that it's more functional. I find that I can accomplish more in the way of functional conditioning using my own body and very little in the way of equipment than back when I was lifting weights and using machines and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel really similarly about that. Like when I first got into going to the gym in high school, I kind of trained more like amateur bodybuilder-ish style and did like machines and all sorts of complicated movements. But now I focus much more, I guess you would say, on motion patterns like hinge, like a deadlift and squats, and then push and pull basically, and then core exercises too. And yeah, like calisthenics, one great thing about them is that it's really good to do functional movements like that. And that's a really stoic thing too, obviously, right? The just simple, like you've told me before, like your body is with you wherever you go, so you don't need any equipment to do a workout with your body.
Exactly. I tend to take it with me everywhere I go. And you really get to know your own body a lot better when you are in subtle ways manipulating how much weight is being borne by this muscle group as opposed to that muscle group. And a lot of these calisthenic exercises require balance in a way that, say, a squat rack doesn't. There are a couple of really good YouTube channels about calisthenics that you might look into. I've learned a lot of exercises that I was not aware of. Just by checking into them. There's a site called Athlean X, and they've got a program called Athlean Zero. It's spelled with an X though, Athlean Zero. That's entirely calisthenic and bodyweight based. And there's another one called I don't have it in front of me. It's called something like Calisthenics and Functional Training or something like that. You might like it. We're
Cool.
not talking
Cool.
not talking a lot of philosophy so far, are we?
Yeah, cool. No, yeah, I saw some of those videos that you posted before.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I've noticed like especially with teaching myself like more complicate or yeah, I guess more complicated bodyweight exercises like one arm push-ups and handstand push-ups like that. It's really hard like to balance yourself in particular.
Oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
one arm push-ups are harder than they look.
Yeah.
Pistol squats are harder than they look
Oh
because
yeah. Yeah.
you use up so much energy and so much of your attention just balancing yourself properly. It's kind of what I mean when I say you get to know your body a lot better. You get to know what it can and cannot handle and what is too much of a strain on this joint or that joint. And when you're almost 50, you gotta know that kind of stuff. I assume you look like you're what, half my age? How old are you?
I'm 28.
Oh, okay. I vaguely remember being 28. It was better. Enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, yeah, I'm trying to.
Getting older ain't for wimps, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So,
So yeah, let's talk more about philosophy since you mentioned it. Yeah. Yeah, I
no one,
remember.
no one really cares how we work out, do
Yeah. Um yeah, you mentioned Socrates before. Like it seems like my friend who I was talking to the other day he's a big fan of philosophy too. He was saying that, all roads lead back to Socrates.
they?
And what do you think about that? Would you say that's like relatively accurate at least?
Yeah, that's fairly accurate. All the
Yeah.
Hellenistic schools, the Cynics, the Stoics, the Skeptics, they all try and trace their lineage back to Socrates. I think even Epicurus, I think even the Epicureans tried to trace their lineage back to him, which I don't find very plausible. But some have suggested, in fact, that the connection between Stoicism and Cynicism might be to some degree fabricated because one of the founders of Cynicism was Antisthenes, who kind of hung around with Socrates, was part of his circle. So we should always be a little bit skeptical about these connections back to Socrates, but everybody wants to be connected with him because there's a sense in which Western philosophy arguably does not happen without Socrates. Without Socrates, it's not clear if we get Plato. Without Socrates and Plato, it's not clear if we get Aristotle. And without those three, it's not clear where the rest of Western philosophy really comes from. So he wasn't the first. The first philosopher we know about in the West was a guy named Thales, about whom we know almost nothing. But he was certainly the most significant philosopher in the ancient world.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Socrates. I try to basically use the Socratic method as much as I possibly can and question everything. And one of my favorite quotes of his, of course, he's not necessarily guaranteed to have actually said this, but one of my favorite quotes that he at least supposedly said was, "The only thing I know is that I know nothing." So I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether he actually said that or not, but at his trial, close story. At his trial, he makes the point that in his pursuit of wisdom, he kept talking to allegedly wise men. He spoke with the politicians and with the poets and the artisans and the craftsmen, and they all thought that they were wise. They thought that they had knowledge of the eternal, immutable truths. What is justice? What is beauty? What is piety? But they didn't. Upon questioning, right, they sort of crumbled when presented with the Socratic method. They would be led into contradiction, led into absurdity. And Socrates realized, well, I do have one advantage compared to these guys. At least I'm aware that I do not know what beauty and justice and virtue and piety are. So he's still pursuing an understanding of those things. Whereas people who think they know what in fact they don't, they cease to pursue it, and therefore they are destined to, remain in ignorance. So whether he said, "I know that I don't know anything," um, he may or may not have actually. He probably said something closer to, "I know that I don't know anything of true value. Don't know anything of the eternal truths." I'm sure he probably knew where his house was and knew that his wife was a pain in the ass, and knew how to get to the agora and stuff like that.
Oh,
And
okay.
his wife was a serious pain in the ass. You got to read about her, Xantippe.
Xantippe? Okay, I'm gonna write that name down too.
Yeah, it starts with an X.
X Xantippe?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't like some of the I like some of the old dialogues with like between Socrates and Plato too, like the Republic, for example, which is obviously like so well known. I thought that was really interesting. Like the ancient Greeks, they like obviously they didn't have modern science or anything like that, but they knew a hell of a lot and had a hell of a lot of wisdom. And of course the Stoics and ancient philosophy in general did too.
Oh yeah. I don't think in terms of practical counsel, in terms of leading a decent life, a virtuous life, or attaining what the Greeks called eudaimonia, I don't think we've made a whole hell of a lot of progress beyond the ancient Greeks. I am not convinced that people today in 2018 are by and large more virtuous than Socrates, Plato, Epictetus. I would say Diogenes. A lot of people disagree. I don't think
Oh, why do they disagree?
about Diogenes.
Yeah.
Well, he was I, who was it? I think Plato referred to him as a Socrates gone mad. When a guy's defecating in public and spitting in a rich guy's face and masturbating in public, a lot of people might not regard that as virtuous. And I'm not advocating any of those behaviors. Right? I'm not suggesting anyone should do that, but a lot of people in his day and still people read about him think he may have had a couple of screws loose, but I really admire the guy. Now, what I was getting at is when people talk about progress, with the exception of technological progress, broadly construed, I'm not convinced that the human race has made a whole lot of progress. I mean, uh, we have the internet now. We have obviously advanced advanced in virtually every technological area you can think of. But in terms of um, living fulfilling lives, I, I don't know. I doubt we're better off today than they were 2,000 years ago or earlier.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with you about that. Like we have we have really advanced technology, but we still haven't advanced like our psychological mindset, and it hasn't adapted to all this technology. So we're just like fumbling around and fucking up all the time, trying to figure out how to use it wisely, I would say.
Yeah, well, fumbling around and fucking up is what people do. The only thing
Yeah,
they do
yeah,
more, the only thing people do more reliably than that is die.
yeah, yeah.
Everyone drops dead, but there are all sorts of there's all sorts of fumbling and fucking around before you get there. Speaking of fumbling and fucking around and just having some fun, you realize that tomorrow is both Easter and April Fool's Day?
Oh no, I didn't realize that.
You have any idea how much fun the Pope could have with it? If you were so inclined, and I would not be able to resist this if I were Pope, I would come out and I would say something like, "Hey, listen, that whole resurrection story, and we made that up. We made that up. We thought it would be lucrative. We thought we'd be able to pull in a lot of bucks that way. And then the next day, tell them April Fools. We're still saying that happened. All right, I don't know why I'm getting off topic so easily today.
Oh, that's okay.
I
That's okay.
apologize to your viewers. I just thought it
No
was funny.
problem. No
Easter
problem.
April Fools. That's awesome.
No problem. Yeah, no, you probably haven't seen my my other live streams that I've done so far, but we tend to go off on lots of tangents, so that's no problem at all.
Cool. Hang on. I got
Yeah.
somebody knocking at my door. Hold on 1 second. Right back.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in. Ah, sorry about that. My stepdog just came in.
Okay, no problem. Hey, what's that picture behind you there?
It's just a painting we bought downtown, in downtown Lodi. It might be. At first, I thought it was supposed to be Venice, but I don't think it is. I think it's supposed to be some small village in Italy, but I know nothing about art. I, it's not one of my areas. My
Oh,
wife bought.
okay. Oh, okay.
When,
Yeah,
when my
I know nothing about art either. I just thought it looked really cool.
It is
That's
cool. Like I said, my wife picked it up. When my wife says we're getting this, I say yes, dear. That's my contribution. When she tells me to do something, I do it. Yeah, that seems to work.
All right.
Yeah.
When you were saying earlier that was it the Epicureans you mentioned that uh, some people claim that they came kind of out of Socrates, but other people disagree. Was that who you were mentioning?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read the claim that Epicureans have tried to trace their sort of intellectual lineage to Socrates, and I've read disputes regarding that claim. Um,
So what
it,
do the people who dispute it say?
the Epicureans argued that pleasure is the good. In other words, the good life is the life in which one experiences pleasure and avoids pain or displeasure. And it's pretty hard to make the case that that's what Socrates was all about. Clearly, Socrates valued the pursuit of wisdom and justice and so on. Exactly how an Epicurean would even, you know, claim to have descended from Socrates is they're the ones who have the burden of proof, I would say. They're the ones who should be answering the question, how did you get this out of the life of Socrates? How did you get the life of Epicurus out of Socrates? Although the truth is, I think sometimes the Epicureans are treated a little bit unfairly. Um, they're sort of regarded in the way we would regard modern hedonists, as if they were having orgies all the time, and, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And in fact, Epicurus advocated simple and easily attainable pleasures. So they're actually not as far removed from the Stoics as they're sometimes presented as being.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
there's some good stuff in Epicurus.
I remember. I think I remember reading in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius about how the Epicureans are similar to Stoics, but they're kind of like more hedonistic,
Mhm.
and I think they also advocate for political involvement less or something like that. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, the Epicurus allegedly argued that involvement in civic life, political life, almost always leads to frustration and anger and enervation. It's better to just sort of retreat to one's garden, enjoy a pot of cheese with your friends, and sort of avoid the rough and tumble of politics. Whereas at least some of the Stoics clearly were very involved in politics. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and so on.
Who was the one who was like one of the main advisors to one of the emperors of Rome at the time?
Seneca was an advisor to Nero.
Right, right,
It's
right.
ultimately Nero who ordered him to commit suicide. And you got to read about his suicide. It's kind of hysterical. He tried three different ways to kill himself. The dude just would not die.
Oh,
Eventually,
what
eventually,
ways did he try?
I'm not sure if I'll get the order correct. I think he opened his veins, and then he drank poison, and then he tried to have himself suffocated in his bath, suffocated by the steam. And finally, I believe the suffocation succeeded. It may have been the first two, may have been the other order. It may have been poison and then opening his veins. But I think he cut his wrists. They drank the poison, and I guess they suspected that because he was bleeding so profusely, or at least because he was bleeding, bloodletting, the poison didn't have its usual effect. So he asked his staff to take him to the bath, and uh, how exactly they generated enough steam in a small enough area to suffocate him, I'm not entirely sure. But it's it's both a funny and tragic end for the guy.
Oh, okay.
He was accused of being involved in a plot against Nero. I guess most historians of philosophy think he probably was not involved, although he may have been. It's not clear. Nero was a
Oh.
bit of a psycho.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading an article about this sometime now that you mention it. Yeah, the Nero seems like insane for sure.
Yeah, they had a
Yeah.
few. The Caligula, they had a few
Yeah,
nutcase.
yeah, yeah. The Roman Empire is not well known for having like always sane emperors, right?
Now, Marcus Aurelius is, I think, generally regarded as the last of the great emperors, the last of the wise and decent emperors. And after that, it didn't last long after that.
Yeah, I watched a Netflix documentary series about his son. Was it Commodus? Yeah, like who came after him, who seemed to really fuck everything up.
Yeah, Commodus appears to have been a dope. He wasn't, did you see the movie Gladiator?
Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
the depiction of his son by Joaquin Phoenix, that was not accurate. I mean, he was, to the best of my knowledge, he was not killed by a gladiator in the in the Colosseum. That didn't actually happen, but he was apparently pretty incompetent.
Yeah, it
But,
seems that way based on my limited knowledge of him. Um, so what do you think about the debate between Stoics and Epicureans in terms of whether the universe is ordered and structured or chaotic?
yeah, it's the God or Adams debate, right? Is the Stoics were pantheists, almost uniformly pantheists. They thought that the universe was God, and I guess there's a sense in which they thought that what we would today call the laws of nature were kind of the mind of God. The logos was the organizing principle, whereas Epicurus either didn't believe in the gods or did not believe that the gods intervened in the universe. Um, are you asking me who I think was right, or
Yeah, yeah.
okay? I don't know who's right. I suspect. I've written a paper about this. I lean slightly toward the intelligent design theory, just on the basis of the fact that so many of the constants that govern the universe appear to have been fine tuned. But I lean that way slightly. I would not be shocked to find out that there is, in fact, no cosmological engineering, no intelligent design. In terms of Stoic counsel, in terms of counsel regarding living one's life in a rational fashion, a virtuous fashion, I wrote another paper called God and Adam's Stoic Council, in which I argue that it really has no practical impact. Whether there's a God or not, I would still recommend living life as the Stoics recommended. I would recommend seeking wisdom and the other cardinal virtues, courage, seeking temperance, seeking to be just. And if there's a God God shouldn't mind any of that. It's all sort of, it's all entirely compatible with the Ten Commandments and so on, as far as I can tell. And if there's no God, I would argue you're still better off living the life of reason, trying to make yourself a virtuous person rather than pursuing sex, drugs, rock and roll, or, rather than doing vicious things that are detrimental to your character, to other people's lives, etc. Even though, and to be clear, I may, in some sense, pursue the Stoic ideal, but I'm nowhere near it. I'm a kind of a disastrous guy. I've got various problems, and I often misbehave, slip up, behave in ways that are not creditable, not virtuous at all. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So.
Yeah, I think that's like all of us. That's very stoic of you too, just to be honest about your faults, I would say. We're all works in progress. I mean, I sure like wish I behaved the way that I want to behave sometimes, and I definitely fuck up a lot. And
We
yeah,
all do.
I would say sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, we all do. We all fuck up a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
My problem has always been a bad temper. I have a real hard time not responding when people aggravate me or irritate me, or not responding in a symmetrical fashion or in a reciprocal fashion. If someone wants to become aggressive with me, my tendency is to go straight back at them. But that's not always justifiable. It's not never justifiable either. Sometimes it may well be necessary to do that, but my trigger finger is a little bit too quick, I would say. But I'm working on that too. Yeah,
I
better than
would
I used to.
say, yeah, I would say I'm actually the same way in that sense. Like especially like when I was younger, when I was a teenager and stuff like that, I had like really severe anger problems, but like just learning about trying to control myself, and in more recent years just like not following the whole kind of like trope in Western culture of like it not being okay for men to express their emotions. I've been kind of like more like that within the last few years or so, and I've dramatically reduced my just like knee-jerk reaction to respond angrily to people and stuff like that. And I think that things that have helped with that are working out. Definitely is one of them that I started in high school, because it's like a way to constructively get out my anger and frustration with the world. And also like meditation, I would say, is another big thing that partially from Stoicism is probably where I first got the idea to do that as well, I would say.
When you say meditation, you're referring to cognitive meditation. You're not talking about writing out your meditations like Marcus. You're talking about meditating in the Buddhist style, or it's something like mindfulness meditation or Vipassana meditation.
Yeah. Basically, I would say what I do, kind of my own version of mindfulness meditation, pretty much.
Yeah, I've tried that. I'm not very good at it. I'm much better with the written meditations. Plugging the book.
Meditations on
Gratuitous
self-discipline and
plug.
failure. Yeah.
So yeah, this is Western style meditation, kind of like Marcus Aurelius or Descartes meditations, the confessions of various different figures. In the West, they tend to be written out. In the East, it tends to be up here in a matter of posture and so on. I'm better with the written stuff than
Yeah.
the
To
other
each
style.
their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of the debate between Stoics and Epicureans about whether the universe is ordered and structured or chaotic, I would
Yeah.
say I'm kind of the opposite of you in the sense that I slightly lean more toward the universe being chaotic than ordered and structured. But obviously through the history of science, you can see that there's more and more evidence showing that it is ordered and structured. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if I find out that that I'm eventually like completely wrong or anything like that. And I think also what you said is the important point. Whether it doesn't really matter because, like, especially in terms of Stoicism, they're really pragmatic. So, in terms of living your daily life, it doesn't really matter whether the universe is chaotic, ordered, and structured. And that's another way that my mindset in general towards life has also changed in the last couple of years or so, I would say, because I I was a militant atheist for at least a few years, and then I eventually decided, you know, uh, maybe like I don't believe that God exists, but it doesn't matter whether anyone agrees with me or not. And I'm not gonna know until I die whether God exists or not. So it doesn't really matter. And I don't need to be a dick and demand that everyone agree with me about whether God exists or not.
Yeah, from a Stoic perspective, the existence of God is an external. It's not subject to my will. I can't cause God to exist or not to exist. So it's to be regarded as an indifferent, right? Whether it's preferred or dispreferred has something to do with one's irrational nature, I suppose. I personally, I would prefer that there is a God of some kind. I would like to believe that there is a designer. And as I say, the modern permutations of the fine tuning argument have persuaded me that it's more likely than not. There was a time when I would have described myself as an atheist and later as an agnostic. Now, I suppose in some sense I'm a believer, at least in intelligent design, but I'm not highly confident about that. I regard it as slightly more likely than not. And I'm also not a cosmologist, and also not an evolutionary biologist. So maybe what appears to me to be evidence of order, or what appears to me to be evidence of some form of intelligent engineering, is more readily explained just by naturalistic principles. So I don't. Um, there's not much riding on it for me. Um, yeah, I'd prefer a God, but if there isn't one, there isn't. What am I going to
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
Manufacture one.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say that you're maybe kind of a pragmatic secular Christian in a sense, if that's a thing?
No, I'm not a Christian.
Not a Christian? Okay, you just believe that there might be a designer?
Right. I'm
Okay.
not suggesting there's anything wrong with Christianity. There's some propositions in Christianity that I just don't believe. I don't buy resurrection. I don't buy virgin birth. I might be wrong, and if I am, okay, I'll be wrong. No, I just see evidence of design. I guess if you had to put a label on it, something like deism. Deism is kind of the thesis that there's an intelligent designer that set the world in motion, that created it, and then has nothing further to do with it, no further interaction. Doesn't perform miracles or answer prayers. I will say this: I do find the Sinai event difficult to explain away. The alleged revelation at Mount Sinai to something like 3 million Israelites. I find it
The Sermon
difficult.
on the Mount?
No, that's Jesus. That's later.
Oh, that's a different thing. Yeah, sorry.
This is in the book of Exodus. Um, I'm not sure how you manufacture and how you market that account. How do you get um, all the Jewish people to believe that that happened, that there was a mass revelation to 3 million of their ancestors, if it never actually happened? At some point, someone has to manufacture that story and sell it. So I always picture someone saying, "Hey, did you know that your ancestors heard God speak at Sinai?" And they say, "I never heard that one." How do you get them to believe that if it didn't happen? But
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
I don't regard that as a very very compelling argument. It's a curiosity to me, right? It may legends emerge over time and so on, but that one's hard to explain. Most of the other
Yeah.
religions are kind of initiated by a revelation to one figure in one sense or another. This is a mass revelation. National revelation is a little harder to explain away. So maybe the Jews are right. I don't know. I'm not Jewish myself, but they might be onto something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, who knows? Like one way in that my mindset has changed toward religion and mythology in general now is that I'm just really curious about them and I want to learn as much as possible about all of them. So
Yeah, me
Yeah, I
too.
mean that might be possible. Yeah, I
There
think
was a time
that's
there was a time when I was kind of waved my hand at all and say, "Ah, it's all bullshit." But I don't. I now regard that as kind of an adolescent attitude that a phase I passed through. I think at least many. I'm not going to say all religions, but I am going to say many religions and wisdom traditions are well worth studying and taking seriously, even if it turns out there's no God or no, whatever the organizing principle is. Um, the more you read, the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament and the Quran, the more you realize how much of our culture springs directly from those texts. The more you run into an expression and you say, "Oh, that's where that comes from. That's where that phrase that I've been hearing my whole life comes from," or that's where this type of character from Shakespeare originated, or whatever the case may be. It's good.
yeah.
It's good stuff, even if it's not true, or obviously some of it's supposed to be allegory and some supposed to be metaphor. It's just a an interesting book to read, especially the Hebrew Bible for me. But again, who cares what I think?
Well, I care what you think.
Well, okay, that's
Lots
one.
of other, and I'm sure everyone who buys your book does too.
Yeah, all 19 of them. I don't know, maybe I think I've only sold about 2,000 copies so far, but we'll
Oh,
see. We're working on it. I didn't
yeah,
expect to sell as much as.
hopefully you sell a lot more.
Hey, I'll
Yeah.
take it. If this
Yeah.
helps, I certainly
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how like Western society in general was kind of founded on religious principles, particularly like Christian principles in a sense. Like you mentioned deism, and I've heard before that a lot of the founding fathers of America were kind of deists too, which is really interesting.
Yeah,
And
allegedly. I think Ben Franklin was allegedly a deist. Some people want to lump Jefferson into that camp. If you read the Jefferson Bible, he kind of takes out all the miraculous stuff. I'm
yeah,
not.
I've heard of that.
I
I
can't.
haven't read it, but yeah, I've heard of it.
There's a book called Free Thinkers. I want to say it's by Susan Jacoby, but I might be wrong about the author's name. It's about what the founders actually did believe regarding religion. And I think she makes the case. It's been a few years since I read it. She makes the case that a lot of them were something closer to deists. Um, but again, I'm not a historian, so I can't do much by way of assessing her claims. I remember liking the book a lot. So another thing to look into.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I've heard some people claim that like most of the founding fathers were deists, and I've heard other people claim that they were more Protestant Christians. I don't really know for sure either, because obviously I'm not a historian either.
I would
But
find I would find it very difficult to believe that most of them were deists. I'm fairly confident most of them were Protestant Christians, but some of the central figures may have leaned in a.
oh, okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah. Yeah, in terms of like Western society being founded on religion and stuff like that too. I think it's interesting. It's also interesting that a lot of well, at least some of my favorite aspects of Christianity in the Bible, like the Serenity Prayer, for example, basically came from Stoicism, right?
Yeah, the Serenity Prayer is not actually in the Bible. That was actually composed in the 20th century. But
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't even realize that.
yeah, it's basically it's kind of a 20th century manifestation of a Stoic worldview. Grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Um, the name of the guy who wrote it always slips my mind. He was a German theologian. You can Google it. It's a little embarrassing. I can't remember the name right now, but yeah, that's not taken directly from the Bible or anything like that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like I tried to read the Bible a few times when I was younger and I just kind of found it boring, but I've been planning on like giving it another try sometime soon and I've been like asking for suggestions of like what books people think are the best. Would you have any suggestions for me of what Bible books you think are the best to
Yeah,
you?
yeah. We'll start with the Book of Job. There's a sense in which the Book of Job is kind of the Hebrew Bible in miniature, um, and I'm a big fan of Genesis and Exodus. Um, Less of a fan of the New Testament, but there's good stuff in there too. Obviously, the Gospels are worth looking at. But if you read nothing else, if you only read one book from any of the corpus, any of the texts, I would say read the Book of Job. It's kind of all, there's a sense in which it's all in there.
Cool.
And
Thanks.
it's also arguably the weirdest book from the Hebrew Bible. When you read it, you'll see what I mean. God behaves in a very odd fashion in that book. God's kind of a gangster in the Book of Job, which makes it interesting too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to reading the Book of Revelations when I read it again, because I heard from like my parents used to be ministers, so they've told me a whole lot about Christianity basically. And they were I remember my mom telling me once that, Andrew, you might like the Book of Revelations. It has a whole bunch of psychedelic stuff happening, like Jesus with a sword in his mouth and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, Revelation is definitely the weirdest book of the New Testament. Um, I've gone through it. I don't know what to make of it. It's kind of like reading somebody's acid trip, and a pretty bad one at that. It's a pretty scary book, but I'm assuming it's supposed to be taken as some kind of allegory. I hope that's not a literal accounting of what the future is going to be like. That would be unfortunate.
It wouldn't surprise me if whoever wrote it was on psychedelic drugs when they wrote it.
I don't know. I don't know what they had access to back then,
Yeah.
but there was something going on. There was,
Have you heard theories about how like for example the Moses when Moses sees the burning bush, there are theories about how at the time in that within that geographical region there were a lot of acacia bushes which have really high levels of DMT or dimethyltryptamine, which is the most potent psychedelic on the planet that we know of. So there are theories and papers written by scholars in recent years about how if this did happen, it might have been the case that Moses was like tripping on DMT from the from the burning bush, and that's why he thought he's communed with God and stuff like that.
yeah, I got to be honest with you. I regard all of those kinds of stories as bullshit. Sometimes some people are so desperate to explain away anything that smacks of transcendent experience that they'll say, "Oh well, it could have been that this drug was somehow ingested by all the people at the foot of Mount Sinai." Uh, First of all, we don't know that Moses actually existed. He may be an amalgam of lots of different people or lots of different characters. Um, we don't know what the alleged burning bush experience was. Obviously, we don't know if it happened, and if something like it did happen, we don't know um, what the phenomenological account of Moses' experience was. Like, we don't know what he actually saw and felt and heard. So, any attempt to um, any attempt to sort of offer an analysis of what was going on in his mind under the potential influence of some chemical that may or may not have been present. It borders on being silly, if you ask me. But that's me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying I believe it. I just think it's really interesting when people come up with really bizarre theories. But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's probably like it's really hard to know for sure, or even with any level of certainty about like what happened back then. I just think it's interesting. But
yeah. If the theory gets too bizarre and too speculative, it becomes less interesting for me. It has to be tethered to some plausible narrative, and then I'll follow along. But once we get to maybe there were a lot of mushrooms around Sinai and everyone was eating them, and then they all thought they heard God. Yeah, maybe, but sounds like you're making shit up, doesn't it? Uh,
yeah, yeah.
of
Yeah, you
course,
mentioned the Quran too. I bought a copy of the Quran a few years ago, and I've been meaning to read it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet, particularly because I was kind of more biased against Islam when I was a militant atheist, but I've become much more open-minded about that lately too. And I've heard from a few people recently too about how Islam is one of the religions, and Hinduism too, that might have been one of the religions that kind of helped, well, at least some of the ideas helped found Western culture too. Have you heard anything about that?
Nothing, it doesn't ring a bell. And again, at least initially, I don't find it to be all that plausible, especially given that, um, you know, the religion's only 1,400 years old, and the foundations of Western civilization, I would argue, go back much, much further than that. So, influenced the development of Western civilization for the past 1,400 years, certainly, but foundational, I mean, it didn't exist. So I think if you want to find the foundations of Western civilization, and obviously this is going to be oversimplified, I say you take Judaism and uh, Greek philosophy. You look to Jerusalem and Athens, and that's where you get the birth of the West, I think. And of course, you got to sprinkle in some Alexander the Great, and that's the Roman Empire. But if you look at kind of the intellectual foundations of the West, Athens and Jerusalem, that's where you start, I would say.
Okay. What around what time was the foundation of Buddhism?
The Buddha lived almost at the same time as Socrates, slightly earlier, I believe. Some people refer to this as the axial age. This is when you get a lot of sort of the foundation of Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy, such as Buddhism, and you get some of the signature events within the what became to be the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition during this axial age. If you go back to about uh, in the neighborhood of 500 BC, and a bit earlier, um, I don't think there's much in the way of evidence that the Buddha and anyone in Socrates' circle could have had any kind of direct connection. But there is at least one suggestion that there was this one philosopher by the name of Onesicritus who traveled with Alexander the Great as far as the Indus Valley, and he allegedly met with the gymnosophists, the naked philosophers that probably would have been what we would today think of as Hindus. I doubt they would have called themselves that at the time, but some have suggested that cynicism might have come from the gymnosophists, that Onesicritus may have come back, told the story of these people living very, very simple lives, didn't even have clothing, didn't concern themselves with norms and social mores and social constructs. Uh, again, I don't know that I buy that, and I don't know how much evidence there is of this connection. It's just it's a story that's been offered to link up cynicism and stoicism with something like Hinduism or Eastern philosophy. Um, it's an attempt to explain the similarities, with some kind of historical connection. Whether or not it actually happened, don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that article that you wrote that you sent to me about kind of the similarities between Buddhism and Stoicism?
Yeah, the title of the article is Roman Buddha, and I published it in a journal the journal's called Western Buddhism or Western Buddhist Studies. If people want to read it, just go and Google Roman Buddha, and it should pop up. Essentially, I try to make the case that Epictetus was not exactly the equivalent of the Buddha, but that he is, for practical purposes, about as close as we get in the Greco-Roman world to a teacher, an advisor, a person of influence who offered the same or very similar practical counsel that the Buddha offered. Their worldviews were different. The Buddha was not a pantheist. Epictetus apparently was. I don't know that the Buddha would have embraced the logos or anything similar to it. But when it comes to living life in accordance with Stoicism, in accordance with Epictetus and the advice he gave, I think if you're just watching two people, just kind of observing them and listening to them and so on, it would be very difficult to tell which one's the Stoic and which one's the Buddhist, unless they drop some specific terminology. Like, if the one who mentions trying to escape dukkha is going to be a Buddhist, right? Whereas the one who mentions, eudaimonia or the prohairesis is probably going to be the Stoic. But apart from that, if you're just kind of um, gauging their behavior, their conduct, what they tend to focus on, what they tend to be concerned about. Very similar, very similar sets of practical counsel, or so I argue, anyway.
Yeah, I remember being really fascinated by that when I read it. And you send me the link for it, and I'll add it to the description of this live stream after when I upload it too. And I'll add the link for your book as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I think you've actually got both links on our LinkedIn communication, whatever they call it, the message
Oh
page.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You did send them to me on there.
I
Yeah,
think so, but if you need them again, just let me know. I'll send them to you, no
yeah,
problem. Yeah,
yeah.
I can,
Cool.
and I'll give you a link to my academia.edu page. You can read everything I've ever written, every article I've ever published. I don't know if it's 29 or 30, something like that. And they're not all about Stoicism. I write about philosophy of religion. I write about metaphysics. The only things you got to pay to see are the books. Did I mention my book? The only thing, yeah, I've written 2 books. You got to pay to see those, but all the rest of the stuff is free. So I'll send you that link, and anybody who wants to, I don't know why anyone would want to read anything I've written, but if you got nothing better to do, there's nothing good on TV that night, then that people can link up to it.
I think anyone like me who's interested in philosophy would be interested in that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
kind and generous assessment. I don't know if it's true, but I don't mind people reading what I write. That's for sure.
yeah.
There are
You were
there are
talking about, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say there are smarter people out there. There are, and I don't know. Have you interviewed any of these people? Have you interviewed Massimo Pigliucci or Donald Robertson or John Sellers or A. Long? Any of those types?
No, I would love to though.
Yeah, you should try and get him on your show. You will realize right away that they're a lot smarter and more knowledgeable than me, and you'll wonder why you had me on your show. But they're certainly worth talking to, and there are a lot of other good ones out there as well.
I
I
think
don't
I
know.
heard Massimo Pigliucci on Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Pigliucci. I think the G is silent, but
Pigliucci?
yeah,
Yeah.
I did some. I know he was interviewed by Scott Perry. He's interviewed a lot. He's kind of a big name. And he wrote an endorsement for my book, that's probably the only reason I've sold any copies at all. Someone saw his endorsement, but he's a genuine big shot within philosophy and within Stoicism in particular. I am not, but he is, and he deserves to be. He's a smart fellow. So
Yeah.
definitely, he's got a new book out. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called How to Be Stoic or How to Be a Stoic.
Oh,
Worth a read. I
oh,
think
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna add that to my list here also. How to be a Stoic.
Yep.
Okay. You talking about uh like words like eudaimonia, I probably just pronounced that incorrectly, but and logos reminded me that I remember from reading about Stoicism that a really cool word that I learned that I think it's ancient Greek, and I'm not a linguist, so I'm not sure I have the meaning right, but it's ataraxia, which means something like tranquility or something. I think that's a really cool
Yeah.
word.
That term comes up within Stoicism, within Cynicism, I think. Um, yeah, ataraxia is the translation that you've got is pretty good. Tranquility, serenity, equanimity, something along those lines, is part and parcel of attaining eudaimonia, of leading the good life, according to Stoicism as well as some other ancient schools of philosophy. If you're not tranquil, if you're not serene, if you can't attain equanimity, in other words, if you're under constant stress and constant worry, and if you're constantly afraid and constantly angry, you're not really living the good life, or at least there are defects in your psyche, in your mind is disordered, and hence, you've got work to do to improve it, and we all do.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to achieve ataraxia is a constant goal of mine because, like, yeah, we all get stressed out and frustrated about life and stuff sometimes, but it's good to try to be as tranquil as possible as you can, but with within reason too. Like you were saying earlier, there are situations in which it's appropriate to be angry and stuff like that too. And oh yeah, this reminded me. I was talking to my uncle and telling him that I was going to be talking to you, and I think he hasn't investigated Stoicism that
Hmm.
much, so he kind of like half jokingly, because he knew that this is kind of like a stereotype, but he had this he kind of half jokingly had this idea of Stoicism that kind of seems to be the colloquial understanding of it, where it means like you should just not have emotions and not let anything affect you. And I was saying, I think Stoics would probably be more likely to say that you should feel your emotions, but then move on with your day and not and try to not be attached to your emotions in the past. Would you
Something
say
like that.
that's accurate?
That's it's getting closer than your uncle is. Your uncle seems to have confused uppercase S Stoic philosophy with lowercase s Stoicism as an attitude or as a general kind of behavioral inclination. He seems to have in mind the character Spock from Star Trek. Right? Are you Trekkie at
Yeah.
all? And Spock is emotionless, right? He everything is a matter of the dictates of logic. Stoicism doesn't advocate that. Positive emotions, you know, love and compassion and the desire to pursue wisdom and so on. Those are all well and good and fine. It's the passions that is the states, the psychological states and emotional states that tend to lead to vicious behavior, that tend to lead in the opposite direction of virtue. That's what we work to either extirpate entirely or at least dampen. Right? We don't want to, when something that would naturally provoke anger or frustration occurs, we don't want to become frothing maniacs because it's very hard to accomplish anything while in that condition, while in that psychological state. But there's nothing wrong. It does not, Stoicism does not advocate complete emotionlessness, becoming like an automaton or something like that. That's not the program. Another good book for you to read. William Irvine, another really, really smart guy, wrote a book, an introduction to Stoicism, and it's called On the Good Life, but the subtitle is On the Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. So there is joy to be found, and there is fulfillment to be found in self-discipline and in attaining wisdom and virtue. So I know a lot of people think of a stoic demeanor as just being emotionlessness, but that's not what Stoic philosophy advocates.
Yeah, I think
So
I'm pretty sure I've read that book by William Irvine actually. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
yeah, it's a good one. He's very smart. Yeah, good philosopher.
Yeah, yeah. One of the aspects I really value in Stoicism is the importance of discipline, because like it's kind of like the one thing that Jordan Peterson says now. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Are you Jordan Peterson? Yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah.
like
One
him.
of the, yeah,
He's
I like him a lot too. Like
yeah.
I love his biblical lectures, even though I'm an atheist, because I like that approach to Christianity. That's really awesome. But it's like one of the kind of a similar argument to the one that he makes, i.e., that pursuing happiness might not like it might be better to like try to be useful and make accomplishments and try to make the world a better place and try and focus on self-improvement than than trying to focus on being happy, because that just like if you're disciplined, like if you have the discipline to do a workout, then you feel better about yourself after you've done the workout. If you feel disciplined enough to write an essay or write a book or write a short story or something like that, you feel really awesome after, because you feel a really profound sense of accomplishment. So it's like a more longer lasting and deeper sense of fulfillment, I think.
Right. And I think that's the last word you use is the key there. I think happiness is overrated and the pursuit of happiness is overrated, especially if by happiness we mean kind of a transient mental state, like the kind of happiness that one can derive from, eating chocolate cake or something like that. What we're really looking for, I think, most of us is fulfillment. We're really looking, we would like to feel accomplished. We would like to accomplish worthy goals. There's way too much focus on narrow self-interest and the immediate gratification. And I respect the fact that Jordan Peterson is telling young men in particular that if you're looking for purpose in your life, if you're looking to live a fulfilling life, you need to focus on your responsibilities. You need to focus on being virtuous. You need to focus on developing your intellect and developing your competence and your skill set. Drugs are not going to do it for you. Sex is not going to do it for you. Being famous is not going to do it for you. Not going to give you what you want. What I really like about Jordan Peterson is his complete, almost complete rejection of what some people might refer to as political correctness. I just have no use whatsoever for political correctness in any form. And it has just gotten insane. And I think what kind of first thrust him into the spotlight is his rejection of this idea that we have any obligation to use the gender pronouns that someone insists that we use, even though we know they're completely inaccurate misuses of the language. I'm glad someone in academia finally said enough with this bullshit, enough, right? Stop pretending that you believe that Caitlyn Jenner is literally a woman. No one believes any such thing, including Caitlyn Jenner himself. He can change his name. He can't just decide I'm a woman now. If you've got a penis and testicles and a Y chromosome in every cell in your body, with the wonderfully ironic exception of some of your sperm cells, you're not a woman. This idea that, we're obligated to use words that don't cause offense. The cynic in me just rebels at that. I don't give a fuck if you're offended. I don't even know what the condition of being offended is, to be honest with you. It appears to be some kind of psychological or emotional state. But when I ask people to explain to me what it is, all I get is synonyms. So what do you mean when you say you're offended? Well, I'm insulted, I'm affronted, I'm aggrieved. Yeah, those are synonyms. What is happening in your mind or body that I should care about? And why are you reporting your mental states to me anyway? As far as I can tell, when people say I'm offended, what they really mean is you've said something that I don't like or I disagree with, and I'm too lazy and too stupid to construct a counter argument. So I'm just going to declare myself offended and pretend that you owe me an apology now. Well, fuck that. I don't apologize to irrational people who, can't bear hearing a concatenation of syllables that they find disagreeable. I don't know. I don't know where these snowflakes come from, and I don't know how they've survived this long.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I've already gotten myself started. See, I'm starting to lose my stoic calm, my stoic serenity. When this kind of topic comes up, I just want to lock on a chokehold. I just want to lock it in. Just when that little snowflake's just about to go unconscious, I want to go shh, and then just drop them. But apparently there's laws against that these days. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you about political correctness. Like if someone gets offended, it's just them not liking what you say.
I always tell people, if you're offended, maybe you're the problem, right? If you're so hypersensitive and irrational that me making sounds with my face or typing pixels on a screen can cause you to lose your not just lose your tranquility, but lose your mind, cause you to become so incensed that you begin weeping and wailing and gnashing teeth. Maybe you're a nut, right? Maybe you're a hypersensitive, irrational jerk off, and maybe I'm not the problem. But
yeah, maybe I'm not the problem if you go and join a crowd of people and start screaming things like Jordan Peterson is a Nazi white supremacist.
Yeah, things that you know to be untrue that you're only saying in the hopes of getting some kind of reaction. Yeah, maybe it's not the rest of us. Maybe it's not the adults who can handle life as it occurs for the most part. Maybe we're not the problem. Maybe it's the snowflakes. And really, I honestly think that very few people have much in the way of respect for political correctness. They've just been cowed and bullied into pretending to going along because, who needs the conflict? Who needs to risk your job? Who needs to risk whatever friendships and familial relations? Because you do have to because you have some hypersensitive, irrational snowflake lunatic, it's easier to ignore them or to kind of just tell them what they want to hear. But personally, I've just had enough. I've had enough of it. My standard response when people say I'm offended is, "Man, go fuck yourself." Right? It doesn't usually seem to help, and some would say that's not very stoic, but it is pretty cynic. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, like one of the ways that I try to be more stoic but often fail is that I tend to just get into like pointless arguments with people when they have these like really biased mindsets as if their opinions are objectively correct about these things.
Yeah.
And like in terms of political correctness, like what I often say is that look, if a guy wearing a dress wants me to call him like Xena Warrior Princess, I don't fucking care. I'll call him Xena Warrior Princess or like some mythical. You want to be called the mythical dragon Smog or something like that? I'll call you that too. I don't care. I just don't think I should be legally required to do it. And I don't think. And I think
Exactly.
that if no, I think that if someone else wants to call you by like your actual name on your birth certificate or the gender that you were born with, I think that they have the right to that too, because I'm a big proponent of freedom of speech. So I think people should be able to pretty much say whatever they fucking want to, unless they're like in promoting violence towards another person or something like that.
Yeah, isn't it sad that that's kind of a novel attitude these days? We actually respect freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Like you say, if you want to be called some ludicrous name, I might humor you if I'm in the mood, but don't tell me that I'm either legally or morally obligated to do so. There is no such obligation. Um, and people who claim, I keep hearing people claim that they have a right not to be offended. I would love to know the origin of this alleged right, especially, and of course, the people who say this are always people who are most easily offended. There's no such thing as a right not to be offended. There's no such thing as a legal obligation to avoid offending everyone at all times. I have no idea how we could communicate if we did that. I literally allegedly offended one of my colleagues a couple of years ago by saying Merry Christmas. I was it was the last day. It was the last day before Christmas break, or excuse me, winter break. I don't want to offend any. I don't want to be Christian centric or anything. But walking out to the car, and a colleague of mine was also walking out to the car, and I just waved, say, "Hey, Merry Christmas." And after Christmas break, I had to have a conversation with my division dean about not assuming that uh, all of my colleagues are Christians. I wasn't assuming anything. I'm not Christian. I was just there's this day called Christmas. People have this. There's this expression we use, "Merry Christmas." If you can get offended by that, what the hell does not offend you? That's just someone manufacturing a reason to be offended, and I see a lot of that these days. Manufactured outrage, phony outrage. I have no time for it. I don't care. You know.
Yeah, like you were just expressing a sentiment. It doesn't literally mean like praise Christ.
No, I was trying to be fucking pleasant, right? Just have a good break. If I had said have a good break, there would have been no problem. But I used the verboten expression "Merry Christmas" because it's Christmas. You can be merry on Christmas without being a Christian,
Yeah,
and it is, by the way, a national holiday. It's not a holy day for everyone, but it is a national holiday. If
yeah.
I say, "Hey, Happy Martin Luther King Day," doesn't mean I'm assuming anything about you. I'm just saying, oh, this day has this name, and have a happy one. So I don't
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
problem.
I've been celebrating Christmas as an atheist for many years now. I like it.
Yeah,
It
most
does
people
matter.
do. Mo-
Yeah.
most most people celebrate Christmas whether they're Christians or not. Most people, at least in our part of the world.
Yeah.
And even if you don't celebrate it, I don't. If I had said have a Merry Thursday, if the Thursday happens to be Christmas and I give it that name, I don't get the problem. But I get the feeling we may have hit a tangent here.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
but I've um I live in Canada here too, like Jordan Peterson does, and I remember I went back to school last year, and there's this one of my teachers. He was like complaining about about Jordan Peterson to his students, and he was saying like he was whining about funding and wanting to make it illegal to use the wrong gender pronouns for people and stuff. And I was just like, that just got me to debate with my teacher in class because I was saying, I don't really think that's what Jordan Peterson thinks.
What kind
Yeah.
of professor or teacher wants to restrict freedom of speech and compel people? It's worse than restricting free speech. It's actually compelled speech. You actually have to use this word, right? You're not permitted to use that word. You must use this word. Because what? Because of someone's feelings, I have to now use a word that I would never use to refer to this person. It's insanity. When people who are professional educators jump on board this train, we just don't have long left. It's just insanity. And again, I think most people actually know it's insane, but they go along to get along, don't want to rock the boat, and so on.
Yeah,
I can
I
think
think
other cliches if you want.
yeah, I think you're probably right. It seems like it's like a really vocal small minority who just make a lot of noise and demand that everyone agree with them.
Yes, vocal, petulant, irrational, whining lunatics. And unfortunately, the culture at large has said, "Well, okay, if it'll shut you up, here we'll go this far." And then of course they push further. Of okay, if it'll shut you up, we'll go a little further. And of course, the grievances are never going to end. This is all straight out of the Rules for Radicals playbook. You always make an impossible demand, and then you hope to get some degree of concession. Then you make an even crazier demand, and you get some concession. At some point, we really ought to stop conceding. Right? At some point, the answer should be, "Nah, no, no more, no more. We're done. You're the problem.
Yeah.
Go away." I think we're probably approaching that, but not quick enough for me.
Yeah, that's what happens when you just give a child who's having a hissy fit anything they want. Then they just they just understand that if they throw hissy fits, they get whatever they want.
Yes, positive reinforcement. If you throw a fit and you get what you wanted, of course you're going to throw another fit. Unfortunately, we've taught a couple of generations now to just keep doing that, which I find baffling. But what can you do? Hey, listen, I know this is your show and everything, but I don't know how long we've been going here.
Hmm. Let me see. What time is it? It's almost 4. I think maybe about an hour and a half or so.
Oh, okay, I don't know how long you usually do these interviews, and I don't know how much longer I have because I do have a few things I have to do today, and I don't mean to be rude or like try and cut it short or anything. I just got some stuff I've got to get to eventually, but I am enjoying the conversation though.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we can finish it pretty soon here. Yeah, I really appreciate you talking to me. Thanks a lot.
No,
Um,
no problem.
before before we just finish it off here, one of my friends who's a big fan of philosophy, I think he got his degree in philosophy too. He wanted me to ask you a question about
Okay.
Stoicism. It was something like basically, what is the Stoic perspective on like activism in terms of like when there's a like basically when there's a tyrannical government, is there room in Stoicism for like a rebellious uprising? That's basically the sentiment of the question that he was asking me to ask you.
Yeah, I think I don't know if this is a settled question among all the people who are currently writing about Stoicism. I think if you look at they do this thing called Stoic Week every year, and they typically publish a collection of essays from the people who spoke at Stoic Week and have written on these topics. And I think this is one of the subjects that about which there's some debate. I would argue that the Stoics would advocate. Um, Resisting certainly tyranny. Stoics advocate pursuing virtue, advocating virtue, but not tethering one's contentment or one's happiness to the successful culmination of that pursuit. So, in other words, you might resist the tyrant, and you should resist the tyrant, but do not do not insist that you cannot be content, you cannot be fulfilled, you cannot live decently unless and until the tyrant is removed, because that's beyond your control. What is within your control is your attempt to engage in certain kinds of actions. You can speak with people, you can communicate with other people, and sort of try to marshal resistance. But as for the actual resistance coming to fruition or being successful, one should not be attached to that psychologically or emotionally. So there's a sense in which you can sort of take that analysis and apply it to any question. Should Stoics do this? Should Stoics do that? Stoics should do what they believe to be virtuous, but not be emotionally or psychologically attached to external events turning out in one way as opposed to another. If it's beyond your control, detach from it. What's in your control, attempt to do wisely and virtuously. But one of the cardinal virtues is courage. So presumably, we need courage, not only martial courage in the battlefield, but moral courage to resist immoral leaders or to resist immoral tyrants.
Awesome, great answer.
I hope
And
that's
you've expressed the Stoic sentiment many times now too, about focusing on what is within your control to change too.
right.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I don't care about the snowflakes being offended. Their mental states are beyond my control. You're offended. Well, I can't make you unoffended, nor would I attempt to do so.
Yeah.
I can say this or not say that, or I can walk away, but your mental states are your business, pal. I don't care. So that's
Yeah. Yeah.
So
All right. Yeah, so thanks a lot for talking to me, William. I really appreciate it.
thanks for having me on. And people
Yeah.
who know me call me Bill or Billy. Either
Oh,
one's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll call you Bill or Billy from now on then.
Okay. It's
All right.
mostly my wife and my mom that call me Billy, but it doesn't bother me. But
Okay. What do you prefer being called?
Bill. Bill
Bill?
works.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for everything. Thanks for the
Yeah.
opportunity, and let me know if there's anything else you need
Yeah.
me to do.
Yeah.
Like, what happens with this now? You just kind of we haven't been live the whole time, correct?
Not the whole time, not when we first started. But we're still live now.
Like
Just
people are watching us right now.
they might no one's watching us right now, but I'll post it and then they will.
That's the story,
Um,
man.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I still don't get that many views on my YouTube channel yet. But
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, I'll just say the things that I like to say at all the end of my videos here, and then you can just plug your work and your new book and stuff like that again, and then we can end it there.
Okay, sounds
All
good.
right. All right. So thanks everyone for watching this great conversation. I hope to have lots more great conversations like this, and hopefully we can talk. Hopefully we can talk again, Bill. And yeah. So all right. So for everyone watching this, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the world. And for everyone who's already subscribed to my channel and supported me on Patreon, thank you so much. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. And for everyone else who becomes my patron on Patreon and subscribes to my channel, thank you so fucking much. You have no idea how much it means to me. And also, always remember this: the funk cures all.
Result. I
All
like that.
right. So, want to just mention your book again and your articles and stuff there?
You know what? Just Google my name, William, and it's F as in Frank, Erraiolo. The book will pop up. All these interviews I've been doing will pop up. So I don't need to keep plugging it. Just I hope people enjoyed the conversation, got something out of it, and yeah, buy my book.
All
That's it.
right. And yeah, I'll add the links for your page there and for your book in the
Yeah,
description for this video too.
sounds good.
All right. All right. Thanks a lot for talking to me.
Thank you, sir.
All
Take
right.
it easy.
Yeah, you too.